في حالات تانية
Guys, you hear me?
Yes, يا دكتور.
Okay. Okay, guys, you should have received some instructions regarding the final. So can anyone remind me toward the end of the lecture just to talk about just to share something with you in order to decide on two matters, okay? But this is like toward the end of the lecture after we finish, today's topic. So this week we're going to tackle a new topic, which is like last week we talked about state and society. So this week we are trying to, guys, can you mute the voice? And this week we are going to talk about state and market. And we basically investigate main determinants and factors of different that would account for different economic development records between different countries. So why some countries manage to achieve high economic growth or to proceed with high level of economic development, while others end prosperity and found solutions to economic stagnation and poverty issues, and while others actually got stuck in a way or another. So the main questions we are like the theoretical questions we are trying to investigate this week, and hopefully we are going to cover the first three this lecture and the other two, the last two next one. So we basically trying to investigate why guys mute the voice. Yeah. Okay, so why some states actually have been much more successful in the global periphery in the developing world? It's late development, late developers in comparison to the developed ones. But even with this global periphery, some countries managed to, or some states managed to achieve remarkable development records, while others actually fail to achieve the same level of economic development. Can we assign a role to economic institutions, meaning like the legal framework that would protect the property rights and guarantee the enforcement of contracts, and determine would regulate and determine, you know, the entry barriers or the entry regulations to the market? And if so, if we can assign like a foundational or important role to economic institutions, do they guarantee economic efficiency? If so, why some economic institutions that actually trigger and produce inefficient outcomes perpetuated and sustained itself over a long period of time? So here, can we talk about different political factors and political power that would enable these economic institutions to stay in place or to perpetuate themselves? And then we are talking about like a different issue, the role of economic ideas. Can we assign any particular and important role to independent role to economic ideas in policy formulations? Or can we speak of like independent power of economic ideas? Or we should juxtapose these economic ideas to the pre-existing constellations of structural and institutional configurations. So these three questions, hopefully we are trying to finish with them today. And then next lecture, we are going to talk about, in a specific context, the role of political preferences in creating economic institutions and the political complementarities or the complementarities between political institutions and economic institutions. And we are going to tackle like different factors that would account for divergent trajectories of formulating social policies. So why some countries manage to establish welfare state and increase social spending in on public goods and public goods provision, while others actually refrain from moving toward the same direction. So starting with the state and why, so we are going to talk about like the state patterns of state intervention today, and then role of economic institutions and economic ideas. Basically Keynesian ideas. So when we investigate or examine variations in economic development record in the global periphery, so to start with, if I ask you guys, when I say development, how can you define development, economic development? So what's the first thing like would pop up to your mind when I mention economic development?
It's an increasing in resources of the country.
Okay. Having like revenues. What else?
Efficient allocation of resources.
Yeah, you need to allocate these resources efficiently in order to To what?
To improve the standard of living for the people, to create jobs, to improve the life of the people.
Yeah, it's a very broad concept, but I
High,
limit. Go ahead.
high GDP?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So you need you have like some revenues or some resources. You need to efficiently allocate these resources in order to increase productivity and to achieve like high rates of to sustain high rates of economic growth. Okay. So I basically talk about like two main elements when I talk about economic development here in this lecture. So I mentioned, I mean like high level of economic growth, but it doesn't mean that social equality and investment in human capital are not like part of, or are not like important elements in development policies. But here, when I talk about when I mentioned like Atul Kohli chapter, I basically focus on economic growth rate on the one hand, and on the other hand, increasing productivity and the expansion of industrial sector. It doesn't mean that agricultural sector is not important in order to achieve high economic growth, but I basically focus on both of them. The role of the state in order to enhance productivity in industrial and in the expanding industrial sectors in order to enhance quality and to achieve like institutional upgrading and achieve high level of economic growth. So economic growth and in expansion of industrial sectors. Some other elements, you know, are there, but we're not going to cover in two lectures, okay? But here we're going to talk about like industrial policies and economic growth. Hopefully when we talk about next lecture about welfare state and social policies, so we can touch upon investment in human capital. It's part of the development strategies and formulation of political development strategies and policy making process as well. So we have like different explanations why different countries in the global south, or the separation between modernized and unmodernized or developed and developing countries, there are different explanations why they achieve high economic growth and they expand their industrial basis, while others actually fail to follow the same trajectory. Modernization theory. We touched upon modernization theory in this course. So what's the main theoretical proposition of modernization theory? What's the underlying logic here?
That the more economic development or modernization of a country, the more democratic it is.
Yeah, it's a link between democracy or regime type and high level of economic growth and urbanization level and education as well. So this is like one variant, like regime type, the link between regime type and economic development. But actually it doesn't answer the question, because some authoritarian, for better or for worse, some authoritarian countries achieved high level of economic growth as well. You can talk about like East Asian countries and China as well. So like we need to investigate other factors that would account for this variation in the outcomes of development policies. Dependency theory. Dependency theory, it focuses mainly on the countries that that actually depending on global capitalism, they are or have been unable to replicate the same dynamics associated with the early developers or the early capitalist countries, that they actually entered or integrated into the global market when the global market was open to manufactured goods from other countries. So actually they are not able to replicate the same dynamics, because in a way or another it's a saturated market, and it's very difficult to carve out their independent position in this chain of production. Some other like economist explanations, some experts would say because of like market failure, so the state has to intervene in a way or another by using particular policy tools and like particular economic decisions in order to correct for these market imperfections. but these explanations do not tell us still like why some countries, if it's that easy just to intervene, why some countries would make some policy choices that would enable or push for economic development, while others actually fail to do the same. Kali actually mentioned, he compared between four main countries, basically South Korea that achieved like high level of economic growth, and Brazil that achieved like erratic, like it has like erratic records, you know, when it comes to economic development, with different throughout, you know, different periods. And India and Nigeria as like a representative of sub-Saharan Africa. So why Brazil and South Korea actually managed to achieve like a high level of economic development, while like other countries, they didn't, India somehow, and Nigeria or sub-Saharan Africa, actually they immersed in this high level of underdevelopment and low level or poor record of economic growth. He actually focused mainly on the state and the policy choices when it comes to policy formulations and implementation of these policies. So he directed the focus to the state in order to investigate two matters: the patterns of state intervention, why state would choose like particular or would make like particular policy decision or would follow particular development trajectory, and what kind of capacity the state has in order to implement efficiently and effectively the policies it has already formulated. So with patterns of state intervention, so we need to focus on decision makers' choices, the policy choices and the priorities actually vested to the industrial sector. And this entails you have to focus on the state policies and choices and priorities in order to promote industrialization and to enhance productivity and growth, with its relationship to both like business sector and trade unions and labor as well. So what kind of policies and institutionalized framework the state actually adopted or endorsed in order to formalize or to organize its relationship to both of them, and to gain some sort of autonomy in formulating policy, in formulating economic policies or public policies. So basically, in order to intervene, to intervene with specific like policy choices, these choices focus mainly on industrial transformation. The state has to enable like industrial sector to expand and to transform from like domestic market in order to create external markets as well, and to focus on the quality of the products as well in order to get access to markets abroad. And it has to formulate specific policies that are supportive of investors, that would increase their profitability and increase their productivity. What kind of interventionist policies the state may have? It might have like imposition of some tariffs in order to protect their domestic products against, you know, the imported goods, and to shield them from international competition. It might offer like some subsidies when it comes to the inputs of the productions. So the state may offer some subsidies in order to enable them to increase and to expand their industrial bases and the capacity, the productivity of their enterprises, or the productivity of the private firms. It might like offer some facilities when it comes to credits and loans. It may offer, the state may offer like training to have like skilled worker in order to have like trained and skilled workforce, and to promote like a technology that would enable them to upgrade their productivity and to export to external markets. So this is like with regard to the private interest or investors, but when it comes to labor as well, so the state, like in these countries, so the state had to discipline labor force as well, because it's sometimes they have like opposing and conflicting interests. Like in order to allocate resources efficiently, in order to increase productivity and to expand industrial bases, so at the same time the state may not have like enough resources or financial resources in order to allocate for to give like or to appease trade unions, like wage increase or more like social security protection. So the state had to curb, the rising expectations and demands of the labor and trade unionists in order to proceed with this industrial transformation and to increase and enhance productivity and the quality of the production. So these are like this when it comes to patterns of state intervention. So you have to investigate, what kind of policy choices and priorities with regard to two main market actors, business or private interest, and labor forces. And when it comes to, this is with regard like the formulation of the policies, but the implementation of these policies needs as well like a capable institutional configuration or organizational capacity of the state in order to implement these policies efficiently. So you have here to investigate patterns of the political authority of these different patterns of political authorities in the state, if it has like independent organizational power, and what kind of force and powerful agencies the state have, and how actually the state used the power it actually has. One crucial factor here is efficient bureaucratic apparatuses. So the bureaucratic elites have to be insulated from any pressures from the private interest, in order to eliminate, in order to minimize the corruption, because like some countries, they have like some level of corruption, but they achieve they manage to achieve high level of economic growth as well. But actually to insulate, bureaucrats from the pressures of private interest, and to prevent any form of state capture by private interest, and to allow these policies, to allow like state actors or the political leadership to formulate policies independently, and then these bureaucratic apparatuses would implement this independently without any kind of obstacles or blocks from private interest. So here, with the patterns of the state intervention, so we have like policies should be taken on the supply side and on the demand side, and the capacity of the state, or how the state interventionist policies would alleviate any kind of constraints on both sides. So on the supply side, in order to gain revenues, or in order to have like high level of mobilizing capacity, in order to have like some resources to allocate, so the state has to have like a power in collecting taxes. So the state has to impose like has the capacity and the penetrating capacity to collect taxes, and to somehow, Mayar, you have a question? After I finish, this slide, you can, I'll take your question. And to repress workers as well. Because some countries, in order to overcome, for a different reason, some political leadership had to appease and to alleviate the anger or the mobilization of popular sectors, basically labor movement, by offering them what the literature calls side payments. Like they may offer like, as it happened actually in Egypt and other Arab countries in the post-colonial period, when they implemented this import substitution industrialization. So in order to build support base, from these popular sectors, in order to overcome elite competitions, or to increase, leverage, bargaining leverage in the face of other political elites. So they have to build support base of the popular sectors. So that's why they had to offer them money, concessions, in order to gain, their support in return. And this, it was like economically inefficient, because like it actually took some resources, instead of allocating these resources in order to invest in industrial sectors. So you transfer or channel these resources into different inefficient usage or inefficient purposes. or non-economic purposes, for political purposes. On the demand side, the state has to on the demand side, the private interest, they needed to institutionalize their relationship with the state, to gain like their some tax exemption, to gain some facilities with regard to loan conditions, and the state as well has to offer like some expansionist monetary policies in order to stimulate and to encourage demands for domestic products, and to offer like them some space by like taxation policies in order to enable investors and private interests to increase their productivity, and then to find when the domestic markets are not enough and they don't create the enough demands for domestic products, so the state would help investors to export their products and to promote their manufactured goods in order to export to external markets. And this way, this would enable them to continue producing, to increase their productivity, and to maximize their profits as well. And with regard to like the state capacity, you need to investigate its relationship to different, social factors and the autonomy of the state bureaucratic apparatuses as well. Mayar?
Yes, Doctor, please. In the previous slides, I wanted to know what is the meaning of disciplining labor forces. I didn't get it well.
Yeah, okay. So when we talked about unmute, Mayar?
Yes, Doctor.
Yeah, I'm talking to you. So last lecture, we talked about Nasser in relation to trade unionist or labor movement. What did he do?
Actually, I didn't study the last lecture. I'm sorry, Doctor. It's not yet.
Oh, okay. So anyone, guys? Because it's related to the last lecture. Okay, so forget about, we talked about like this mix of sticks and carrots, but when it comes to disciplining workforce or labors, so we talk about, the stick side of the policies. So political leadership, they didn't need to win them over, to win like trade unionists over, because they didn't need, to offer them concessions with regard to, as I mentioned, to offer like, some sort of material to distribute some sort of material benefits in different forms, like increase in pay increase, or social safety nets, or even like this kind of collective goods. So the political leadership in particular countries, which in particular states that we are going to talk about, capital intensive or developmental states, they didn't need to do that. They didn't need to build support base and to make any extensive side payment. They made like side payments, but not that extensive to the extent that would lead to economic inefficiencies, in order to save up like some economic resources and to allocate to encourage investors, to increase their productivity and their profits from industrial sectors. Okay, Mayar?
Yes, Doctor, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah. So like it would like control their demands, and these are like authoritarian states, so by repression mainly. Okay.
Yes, Doctor. Okay.
Yeah. So when it comes to political and patterns of political authorities, so there is a distinction between, this is like the most prominent, classification is developmental states, and how they managed to achieve a high level of economic growth, and they managed to create, some markets for their exports. And the main element here is the rational legal bureaucracy. So it had these states, they inherited from the colonial period this form of efficient bureaucratic apparatuses, and like in a way or another, bureaucrats or the bureaucratic elites are insulated, or they enjoyed some degree of autonomy with regard to formulating and implementing economic policies. And the political authority is highly centralized. It's like the political leadership centralized, this political authority. So it had the political leadership and the narrow ruling coalition, they have all the authority over the management of the economy and over like decision-making, economic decision-making process. And it's cohesive as well with regard to like there is no like or low level of inter-elite conflicts, and like the high capacity of high repressive capacity as well. So it's like narrow ruling coalition. So the political leadership didn't need to broaden, the ruling coalition in order to invite, other political elites or to compromise and to converge on political matters. It's a very narrow ruling coalition, and the socioeconomic foundation of these of these regimes are the foundation is really narrow, and there is kind of a marriage between repression and profits. The state actually vested priorities in order to build to cultivate the relationship with the private interest, and therefore and accordingly the state formulated its economic policies accordingly in order to increase productivity and enhance the quality of the products. That was like developmental states. Fragmented, what he called like fragmented multi-class states as well, they share the same properties of effective rational legal bureaucracy, but what happened, these states had to broaden the class alliance. Like when it comes to the balance of forces or the balance of power between different social classes, so political leadership had to expand the coalition in order to include different social elements, and this would made the authority structure less cohesive if you compare this to the developmental state. And by like inviting different social forces or by broadening your class alliance, so you have like different interests political leadership had to accommodate. In order to accommodate different and even conflicting economic interests, so the decision-making or the formulation of the economic policies would be highly politicized. It would be like highly dependent on cultivating political support, not to trigger, the outrage, not to trigger any kind of frustration of anger of this like broader class alliance. So when it comes to the formulation and the implementation of economic policies, this part is highly politicized, and this would subsequently lead to less efficiency when it comes to allocating resources or alleviating pressures on or constraints on the supply and demand side. For the supply side, the state may have may not enjoy the same capacity when it comes to collecting taxes, because it needed to accommodate some private interest. So the state, when it comes to public expenditure and the decision of public spending priorities, may not the main target may not to or this kind of the orientation of the public spending policies, not necessarily for enhancing productivity or for growth promotion or industrial promotion, but actually to accommodate some interest and to appease and some social forces. And this leads to when the state actually becomes less independent when it comes to the formulation and the implementation of policies, this would create corruption and what the literature mentions cronyism when it comes to the relationship with the private interest. So not necessarily the main target, not necessarily to increase economic efficiency, but actually it would offer some preferential treatment to particular private interests that they have close connections or closely connected to the political circles, or they are part of the class alliance. And in some other cases, this would trigger hostility from other investors that would refrain from investing domestically, and this would lead to capital flight and affecting actually the aggregate level of economic growth. And on the supply side, that was on the supply side. On the demand side as well, so the state would be vulnerable to the pressures from powerful economic interests. This broader class alliance and politicization of economic policy making, or this decision making process, this would create powerful economic interests that they have like say in the decision making process or in development trajectories. So they would push for some fiscal policies or some developmental policies in order to protect, you know, their own interest, or to actually to save like the economy, rather than stimulating, you know, demands or increasing, you know, this productivity and enhancing quality, not necessarily for economic purpose that targeted at increasing productivity and profitability of the private interest, but actually protecting, you know, some interest, even if this would lead to economic inefficiency and wouldn't lead to any kind of export promotion or increasing expanding industrial bases and increasing, you know, export or following, you know, export promotion strategies. So the central point here, it's highly politicized economic decisions and vulnerability of decision makers to a particular economic interest with regard to this interventionist policies. With the neo-patrimonial what the literature mentions, neo-patrimonial states, what do you expect, guys? This is like it's on the other extreme. Like it has like poor quality bureaucratic apparatuses that they actually focus. It's not like legal or rationalized, you know, bureaucratic apparatuses. It's all related to personal leadership, as it actually, this is very prominent in sub-Saharan Africa or kleptocratic, you know, regimes. So this, by definition, when there is no like efficient bureaucratic apparatuses or efficient institutions or organizations that would enable the independent formulation of economic policies that target economic efficiencies and the efficient and effective implementation without any fragmented jurisdiction between different organizations. So the lack of these legal apparatuses and poor quality bureaucracies, it actually triggers inefficiencies in alleviating these, even like these constraints on the supply side and the demand sides. These constraints are very high, and the state are much more vulnerable to these to these pressures, and to make decisions that would actually invest in economic inefficiencies rather than triggering or guaranteeing economic efficiency. So if institutions matter, economic and political institutions actually matter in order to formulate better development policy choices. So why it's difficult for different states, like underperforming states, why it's difficult to build or to create these economic and political institutions? Why it's in order to solve, you know, their prosperity and poverty problems, in order to enhance productivity and increase their growth rate, and to solve their poverty problems. So we move to a different article. It's actually listed in your reading list, which actually by Asamoah and Robinson. They talk about, you know, economic institutions are key when it comes to solving issues or problems of economic development and economic growth. Back to neo-institutionalism and the formulation of institutions. What institutions are? And how actually they come into being. So what institutions are?
Doctor, I'm not sure, but
It's
I'll
an
try.
organization.
It's
Mayar and Malak. Mayar first and then Malak, okay?
yes, doctor. I think it's some concepts or thoughts that is accepted by by a specific, maybe a country or a specific group or something like that.
Organizations, what? That
It,
were created.
I said it's some concepts or something like thoughts that is accepted by a group of people or maybe by the country as a whole.
I'm not sure if I get this fully, but Malak?
It's an organization founded for a specific purpose, even if it's school, مثلا, so it's educational purpose or religious purpose or political purpose and so on.
Any more thoughts on this?
Doctor, institutions يعني they prescribe rules يعني they sets
No,
of
yeah,
rules or norms.
yeah, exactly. It's the rules of the game. Okay, it would specify, it would impose like some constraints on people's behavior, and would ensure like some binding mechanism just to make sure that everyone would abide by these rules. So by the same token, this is like economic institutions as well. The creation of the economic institutions would create, this kind of set the rules of the game. And it's, as they mentioned, humanly devised. Like people actually created, these economic institutions as a coordinating device in order to minimize transaction costs, to offer information, and to make sure that their properties and their interests will be protected, in the future. And this would regulate, the entry, to the market, and the like investment policies, and their how to increase, their to offer, some information about the conditions of the market. So that's why they would proceed, with this sector, or would increase, the productivity in this sector, or would invest, in channel resources in a different one. And as well, like if you have like as like private firms or private interests, they need some sort of guarantees about the enforcement of the contracts as well, in order to protect their economic interests. So it's basically, it triggers, this coordinating and collective action problem, because like society, different the members of the society, has to the members have to get together in order to decide on the creation of these economic institutions, and different like the stakeholders, basically, in order to increase, their like to achieve high level of economic growth with regard to human and physical capital, and to improve to achieve some improvements in technology as well. So like economic institutions are essential in order to have like efficient and to solve these development problems. But when it comes to economic institutions, or like any formulation and implementation of economic policies, these policies do not only like feed into the level or of the economic growth, but it actually changes the distribution of resources in society. Some groups, there are from any like economic and any economic or public policies, there are winners and losers. So some people would benefit more from these policies, and these policies would change the distribution of the economic or the distribution of power resources in society. Because it's like a collective choice in society, so you need to pay attention to both, like not only like the role of institution in safeguarding or promoting efficiency in order to increase economic growth, but actually these policies would have different implications for the distribution of resources across different social strata or different individuals and social groups. So that's why this conflict of interest over creation and the choice of economic institutions, the conflict is essential in order to understand the evolution and the persistence of particular economic institutions. So that's why the underpinning or the decisive factor here is political power. People that would have gather enough political power, it would be like de facto or de jure, de facto, meaning de jure firstly originated from the existing political institutions, like some political elites, some authoritarian elites or democratic elites, some sort of constitutional checks and balances, or checks on the executive or checks on the political elites. This would offer like de jure political power. And in absolute monarchies, we have like excessive prerogatives in order to collect taxes. It was like, you know, in arbitrary form, or to offer, like, you know, some sort of political authority to these political elites, so that they have like this de jure power to accept, to confiscate or to grab, you know, some assets, to nationalize some resources and expropriate, you know, other resources. And some others, they may have like de facto power. This would they may have like amassed like economic resources that would manage to help them to resolve their collective action. I'm going to give an example to elaborate on this. So in order to understand the creation of economic institutions, so you need to pay attention to the conflict of interest and the political power in society, de jure or de facto, that would enable, you know, particular inefficient economic institutions to persist because they have like this political power, legally or effectively. Or if they have like when people, or when some economic policies would lead to like distribution of power resources in society, so this would create powerful social class that would push for the change in the political institution as well. So let me explain what happened in England, for example, in the 16th and 17th century. The monarch had like absolute authority in order to impose taxes or to expropriate assets and resources. So no one had to challenge, or had the ability to challenge this absolutist authority of the monarchy as a political institution. So what happened with the enabling or facilitating, you know, this international trade, especially Atlantic trade, this enabled particular classes like upper classes and merchants to accumulate some economic resources. They had like enough economic surpluses in order to use to field, you know, some military force in order to challenge the absolutist tendencies of the monarchy. So now they have enough economic power, economic resources to invest, and this had been translated into some military force or military power that would challenge these absolutist tendencies of long established, you know, absolutist power of the monarchy. So they managed to not only like to dispose, you know, the king, they had to change the political institutions because of what the literature mentioned, the commitment problem. So these people, or these economic classes or economic social groups that they gathered or accumulated economic power, they changed later the political institutions for fear of this commitment issue, that they cannot at the time credibly commit the monarch not to change, you know, the distribution of the resources, or not to change the economic policies to their advantage. So they may have pushed for change in economic policies. Just, you know what, just issue, you know, this legal or this regulation that would protect, you know, property rights, or would facilitate or secure our trade in our trade roads abroad. So they didn't actually push only for that, but for change in the entire political institutions, because of like two issues: the commitment issue, or the commitment problem, that the people with political power, the monarch, you know, may have changed, you know, the economic or may have like alleviated their anger and offered some economic concessions. But if they didn't have political power, so they were not able, you know, to curb, you know, any absolutist, you know, tendencies of the monarch in the future, that would have changed, you know, this economic privileges or economic benefits. So that's why they had to go like hand in hand, change in economic institutions and guaranteeing some legally some economic interest and economic and protecting their properties and economic interests, that this had to be shielded by political power and political institutions as well, in order to protect their interest in the future and to credibly commit, people in power not to change, the distribution of resources to their benefits or to their advantages in future. And the same logic applies to the existence or the persistence of inefficient economic institutions. In some countries, some inefficient institutions that would perpetuate or reinforce underdevelopment or lack of investment in innovation and research and development or in education may persist over time because of the existence of political power or powerful social groups or political elites that they actually they had stake in perpetuating and reinforcing the same economic institutions. In the US, for example, the end of slavery in the South, they had long have this slavery as a political institution. So after the Civil War and the end, the dismantling of this slavery as a political institution, so still like landed elites didn't have any incentive to invest in education and investment in order to increase, the productivity or to make, transfer to industrialize their economy and to make a transition from agricultural system to industrial system. Because of this, like labor repression and the lack of mobility of they had the power, to enforce labor to work in their lands. So they didn't have any incentive to educate them or to invest in education or training or to improve, any kind of to have any kind of technological advancement or technological progress. So even like the change of the political institution after the end of the slavery, it didn't change, the economic institutions. Like the landed elites or planters, they continued on reproducing the same inefficient economic institutions. They didn't invest in education, they didn't invest in industrialization nor innovation. Because of what? These local elites, especially, on the state level, they had some sort of de facto power resources. And they codified this into laws in order to continue like segregation or repression, to continue different forms of forced labor or forced repression, just issuing, some laws that would keep labor from moving between different plantations or different regions in order to enforce them to work in the cotton field. So they reproduced the same inefficient economic institutions, despite the fact that the change in this political institution. In Bolivia as well, they had like revolution in 1952 that transformed actually the state apparatuses and the state institutions. It brought like different political elites and different political class to power, and they built, their own military, and they ushered in as well far-reaching redistributive programs, and they incorporated labor and peasants in order to enable, this import substitute, in a way, import substitution industrialization. To build like industrial bases, they aimed, to create this. But what happened? So the movement of national revolution that actually took power, and now, the political elites established and remolded, the state institutions. But what happened? Rural elites, they had like extensive and far-reaching clientelistic networks in the rural areas that prevented, the MNR people or elites to penetrate these areas and to actually implement their economic and social policies efficiently. So here, like these like Acemoglu and Johnson and Robinson, try to schematically show you how, the argument flows. So basically, with the political institutions, some political elites, they have or enjoy this de jure political power. And this would enable them to create, particular in time T, like particular economic institutions. And these economic institutions, they have like implications not only for economic performance, but the distribution of resources in T+1. like over, over time, some social groups or individuals and winners of these economic institutions would accumulate some power resources that would be used in order to change the political institutions. And here, like the distribution of resources it would account for the persistence or the change of particular economic political institutions. So the distribution of resources in time t, this would enable some social groups to have like de facto political power in order to affect, the change of the political institutions in T+1. Guys, any questions so far? So we answered here that all of the different patterns of state intervention and different level or variation in state capacity that would account for, with relation to both like business investors or private investors and labor, that this would account for the efficient formulation and efficient implementation of economic policies. And these economic policies on the supply and demand sides would account for the development record, like high level of economic growth and the expansion of the industrial sectors and institutional and technological upgrading. So taking it to a different level, to the economic institutions and the relationship between economic institutions and political power and political institutions, we investigated what Acemoglu and Robinson mentioned about the inseparable relationship between economic institutions and political institutions in order to understand why some countries managed to create some efficient economic institutions while others actually kept perpetuating the same inefficient economic institutions. And the deciding factor here is political power that could be like de facto or de jure. So you need to investigate like political power and the effect of the economic institutions on the distribution of resources in order to understand the continuity and change of particular institutions. Peter Hall took this to a different or approached like the development or the formulation of development policies from a different angle. He talked about like the power of the economic ideas, how some economic ideas would have an influence over formulating or over decision-making process. So if I ask you how like people who are working on Arab socialism, how like these like political ideas or ideology would have like exert some causal power and would affect, the decision-making process or the formulation of economic policies. In what sense ideas may have an influence over policy making or policy formulation? I'm not addressing only people who are working on Nasserism and Arab socialism, but generally speaking, if I ask you how ideas would affect decision-making process. Anyone? Just try to guess. So again, we are borrowing, some of the theoretical tools we discussed in the first half of the course in order to bear on several theoretical questions. So the theoretical questions this week are pretty much related to the development issues. So Kahli actually mentioned something about the state intervention, pattern of a state intervention and different capacity of the state from like a structural perspective and then an institutional one, and the embedding, actors into this structural formulation. And then Acemoglu and Robinson focused on this institutional level and the underpinning, political power that would enable, some economic institutions to sustain themselves while others actually change over time. And this to answer why some countries managed to resolve, the problems of economic growth, prosperity, and poverty. And they managed to invest in human capital and technological innovation in order to achieve economic growth or economic development. So here, like how economic ideas would affect the formulation of specific policies or formulation of economic policies that would feed back into or would guarantee or in order to achieve economic aggregate, economic growth or a high level of economic development. Just try to think how ideas would help in this. Do you believe in this to start with? Like there should exist some sort of ideational foundation of public policies or economic policies?
Doctor, I'm not sure, but I think that's related to the ideologies that a person follows, and they influence how they make the choices in the market. For example, like the rational ideologies or stuff like that, they influence if the market is a free market or how we deal with it, I think.
Okay, so you believe in the role of ideas?
Yes.
Okay. Any other account, guys? Okay. So back to like the Marxism, and ideas are part of the superstructure, not the base of the political economy. So it has nothing to do with the mode of production and the relationship of the production. So that's why people who focus on, or writings actually that focus on the role of political or the power of economic ideas are kind of unorthodox, would offer unorthodox account in the political economy field. So the central notion here is these kind of economic ideals would offer like innovative basis for policy formulation. It would offer some knowledge, so decision makers and politicians would capitalize on in order to formulate a particular economic policy that would resolve a particular economic crisis or economic issues. But the question here, because we are talking about like mechanisms and in a way or another like causality, if you're a behavioralist or post-behavioralist, so can we speak of like explanatory power by just citing ideals? Like this kind of Arab socialism as an ideology or as an ideological foundation of Nasserist regime affected the economic and the decision-making processes throughout the 60s. So what's the depth, what kind of explanatory power these ideas may have by only citing these ideas, just only citing the ideas would offer them explanatory power? Or we need to analyze these kind of economic ideas in relation to the existing constellation of institutions and the existing structure. So here, what this chapter actually tried to do, it agreed that political or economic ideas, these economic ideas have independent economic power, that these economic ideas are not like Arab socialism, Keynesian ideas, as we are going to explain shortly. They have like independent explanatory power in their own. So they are not like a reflection of some material benefits, some political class or political people that would have like de jure or de facto power resources. They have like these ideas and then implemented these, but these economic ideas, they have like independent power, explanatory power, or explanatory independently or independent of the material benefits or interest of some social groups. Because in some cases, these ideas, the diffusion of these ideas actually changed social groups' perception of their economic interest. Like conservative people, like that they believed in the classical approach in like market mechanisms and non-interventionist role of the state, they became later, you know, the diffusion of Keynesian ideas changed, you know, the perception of these people to their interest, and they agreed to these kind of interventionist policies of the state in order to offer solution to social to economic crisis or economic problems. So saying that, it doesn't mean that you can analyze these ideas separately, or they are separable from the economic and political and administrative viability of policy formulation. So back again, in order to formulate policies, so you need like efficient and rationalized bureaucratic apparatuses, the administrative viability, how they receive, how like bureaucrats or bureaucratic elites would receive these ideas in order to formulate these policies, and economic viability, like some economic experts and some political viability as well. Some politicians and political leadership and the ruling political parties would buy into and would receive well these ideas in order to translate these ideas into particular public policies or economic policies. So you here again, you situate, you know, these ideas within, you know, the larger or the overarching structural and institutional setting. So you need to examine, you know, the economic and political and administrative viability of these by focusing on political leadership, structure of state apparatuses and state-society relation, and perhaps, you know, the historical circumstances and conditions that enable some economic ideas to be much more attractive and to appeal to decision makers and economic experts than others in different periods of time. I think you touched upon this in your introduction to political science. Keynesian ideas. It's related to the general theory wrote by Keynes. Anyone can elaborate on this? You had like political economy chapter in your introduction to political science. Have you studied it? Yes or no?
We didn't take it in the introduction to political science, but we did take it in the economics class.
Okay, yeah. So tell me, what like Keynesian ideas all about?
Well, he did support
Doctor, that the economies didn't يعني stabilize themselves and they need intervention, مثلا governmental intervention to
Salma?
help. يعني.
Yeah, thanks,
Malak.
Yeah, Salma, you wanted to say something as well.
I was gonna say something similar. I was going to say he did support the idea of the free market, but he thought that it wasn't capable of sustaining itself without regulation.
Yeah, exactly. So there was like a common belief, according to like classical economists, would say like, you know what, leave it all to the market mechanisms, and unregulated market without any form of state intervention would assure, you know, the full exploitation of societal productive potential, would assure, you know, this create, you know, adequate purchasing power. So all the productions, you know, will find adequate demands. But what happened, you know, with the Great Depression and the economic recession in 1930 or 1928, that was like a great failure of the aggregate demands. There is no like the market didn't enable, you know, or didn't assure, you know, this full purchasing power, and all productions, you know, didn't find, you know, adequate demands. So that's why he actually introduced, you know, this idea of state intervention in order to manage the demand management in recession periods. So how the state would intervene in order to manage, effective demands, or to stimulate demands for products and to stimulate to create demands for domestic products in these periods. So he talked about the active fiscal policy. So the state had to intervene in order to channel some material resource to actually channel money into in a different forms like public work and tax reduction in order to offer incentives for private investors to invest in domestic market and to produce more, and at the same time it would create full employment by state investing in public works. So they may have this will workers or consumers would gain some purchasing power in order to buy the products, and this would encourage both like full employment and creating demands and stimulating and encouraging domestic demands in domestic markets. And the state as well would expand its public spending in order to stimulate and encourage to create demands for the products and to push investors to produce in the private sectors and to stimulate investment projects. So people that they didn't believe in this interventionist role of the state, they started to buy into gradually. Like his ideas, didn't gain any kind of, the ideas were not appealing in the interwar period, but after the Second World War, these ideas actually were received well by politicians and economic experts, especially in England and Scandinavian, in Europe, in Western Europe, and in England, Germany, and Scandinavian countries. So again, like ideas here, deserve like separate analysis in order to investigate how these ideas, Keynesian ideas about state interventions and active fiscal policy, were received by economic elites, politicians, and bureaucratic elites in these countries, in Europe and in the US as well. So the historical context was the end of the Second World War, the increasing role of the United States in the reconstruction economy, that the United States had to send some economic experts to Japan and Germany, and to create international institutions that would that helped with the dissemination of these ideas and enabled some experts and politicians to buy into these ideas and to try out new ideas in order to solve economic problems and to create to stimulate demands for domestic in their domestic markets. So economically, so you have to like as the chapter actually explains here, embedding these economic power or the economic ideas into the constellation of the structural and the institutional configuration by investigating the economic viability and political viability and administrative viability in using these ideas to formulate particular economic policies. So as I mentioned, like these ideas, by sending creating economic experts that actually believed in these ideas and the interventionist and active fiscal policies of the state, they changed as well the perception about the problem, the perception of the new reality after the Second World War, and this triggered change in the perception of the economic interest of even conservative, not only social democrats that they believed in this interventionist role of the state, but even some conservative politicians and economists, they actually sustained the applicability and the implementation of these economic policies. So timing was very important to in this kind of persuasion processes, to get people to be faithful in particular economic ideas, and creating some economic experts, especially treasury and central bankers, that they would implement and create and formulate, you know, these kind of interventionist fiscal policies. So the economic experts actually they gained access, you know, to the decision making or policy making processes, and economic experts now like believing in these ideas, helping, you know, bureaucratic elites, and giving access to politicians to these ideas in order to be formulated and translated into particular policies. So politically speaking, investigation on the investigation of the or the role of the ruling parties and the ruling elites was crucial as well. So you need to highlight and to pinpoint the relevant authorities as well. The Labour Party in Britain and the Swedish, you know, Social Democratic Party or Social Democrats, that they got access to these economic ideas and formulated, you know, this kind of political qualities of relevant authorities in order to implement or to translate these economic ideas into particular policies. And they created as well this political discourse of the managerial state. So they, in order to make, you know, these ideas acceptable, so they created, you know, this political discourse about, you know, the advantages of the important role of the managerial state and the interventionist measures in order to resolve some economic problems, and to have like to speak to different interests in society and potential coalition partners. So this like these ideas managed to get some political forces together and to form some political coalitions in order to proceed with these with these economic policies, because they believe that this would serve like common national interest or common national purpose. So they formed their coalition and forming political coalition in order to implement these policies. And this actually led to class compromise as well, like antagonistic social forces like private interest and labor or trade unionist, that they had like this hostile relationship before. So they managed, you know, to trade unionists, they had like some demands, and that actually these demands ran against, you know, the interest or the economic interest of private investors. And these ideas and creating, you know, new forms of political coalitions and laid the groundwork for the class compromise, meaning this is not like opposing aims or targets. In order to enable like full employment, so private interests and investors, they should have had like full control over investment decision. So the investment of today would offer like employment opportunity tomorrow, and this happened like you can achieve like full employment and sustained economic growth by getting together that this is not like conflicting, you know, targets. This actually changed the perception of both social forces in order to proceed with economic policies that would serve, you know, the interest and the common purpose of different social actors. I'm not sure the but I can say that administratively as well. So these kind of economic ideas, bureaucratic elite, it had to fit into the long-standing, you know, administrative biases. Like, for example, if people like, if bureaucrats or the administrative structures, they are used to particular like non-interventionist role of the state. It's just like formulation and related to the market mechanisms and prices and the signals, you know, from the market in order to create these demands. This actually would assign new role to administrative and bureaucratic elites that they needed to accommodate. They created, you know, different agencies and different organizations in order to help with the implementation of these economic policies. So like the quality of civil servants as well. And to what extent, you know, to what extent they efficiently and effectively receive these ideas and therefore would implement this. Their autonomy over implementation and the relationship with the politicians over the management of the economy. And most importantly here with regard to Keynesian idea, because it has something to do with the fiscal policies. So the role or the authority of the central bank over making decisions. So here, they have to have common interest and common purpose in order to formulate these policies to create, the relevant, organizational agencies or administrative agencies that would implement these effectively, and the political leadership as well. But the role of the political leadership is essential and crucial, but the bureaucrats that would block or facilitate the implementation of these policies, is key as well with regard to the role of ideas in formulating and implementing economic policies. Any question, guys, so far? So again, we answered the first 3 questions. Why some states managed to achieve, or they were much more successful than others in the global south or the global periphery in they were late developers, but they managed as well to have remarkable development records. And then we focused on the patterns of state intervention and the capacity of the state apparatuses, highlighting or classifying, different types of states and different patterns of political authorities, developmental or state capital intensive, and then multi-class fragmented states and neo-patrimonial, and then how this would affect the supply and the demand side, and the role of economic institutions as well with regard to guaranteeing or economic efficiency and the political power that actually undergrad, does undergrad, the existence or the creation and the sustainability of these economic institutions, and then the role of political ideas in formulating some economic policies that would help with offering solutions to economic crisis, and whether or not we can assign independent role of the political ideas, or we need to juxtapose these economic ideas to the existing institutional and structural constellations by examining and looking into the administrative, political, and economic viability of these ideas. Next lecture, we are going to talk about, the role of political preferences in formulating or creating economic institutions and different trajectories of welfare spending or social policies. Yara?
Yes, دكتور. دكتور حضرتك قلتي في آخر الليكتشر هنتكلم على الفورم بتاع الفاينل وكده.
Yeah. So again, because I received few emails, people who didn't have access to Moodle. So I posted, my comments on the midterm question on Moodle, and I offered, some individual comments on Blackboard as well. And I got to know that all sorted out, and you got access to the comments on Blackboard. So again, I got some other emails regarding the reading lists I posted on Moodle. So again, I'm reposting, the reading lists in this lecture's slides. So here with the Google Drive links to the scanned materials. So you have here the Arab socialism and the ideational forces and democracy, elite choices, ethnicity and violence in Syria. And Salma asked me for one more topic about patronage politics and ethnicity activation in Lebanon. I posted this on Moodle, and here you have some readings that would help you with answering, this question, would offer some theoretical perspective or angle in order to answer the question. For people who will be working on Syria, the material just would help you with the theoretical foundation to build, theoretical foundation for your answer, but you need to look for more material about the chronology of the political events in the first 2 years, and to analyze, Bashar al-Assad's speeches, how he actually played into people's fears, and he played, with this ethnicity card in order to abort or to crack down on together, with the violence, to crack down on the protesters in the first 2 years. Yeah, I've got an email regarding the instruction for the final. I'm not sure. You should have received as well some instructions regarding. You have to submit your preferences with regard to in-class or online exam, right?
Yes, yeah, doctor.
Okay, so you guys, roughly speaking, you would prefer online or in class or physical one?
دكتور هو كان في
لا
instructions
اونلاين يا
بتقول
دكتور، في كورونا اونلاين.
اونلاين يا دكتور.
بتقول ان احنا يعني ما ينفعش نمتحن، يعني لو المادة حضرتك مثلا قررتي او كلنا قررنا ان احنا نمتحنها اونلاين وكده، يبقى محدش هيروح يمتحن المادة دي في الكلية.
Yeah, I know this. You can unmute because I need to discuss this. But the thing, there's another thing, okay? According to the instructions, so the final has to be like 25 questions in a multiple choice form. Only 25, and it accounts for 50% of the total grade.
دكتور هو احنا مشكلتنا في الاونلاين ان هما كاتبين ان مش هيبقى فيه باك تراكنج، واحنا الباك تراكنج يعني اللي هو ممكن نتلخبط في سؤال فبنبقى عاوزين نرجع له، فدي مشكلتنا. فدي حاجة ممكن تخلينا ننزل نمتحن في الكلية بسبب ان مفيش باك تراكنج.
اوكي.
هو لازم يبقى امتحان يا دكتور، يعني ما ينفعش نعمل زي حوار الميت اللي هو الكويستشن بتاع الميد ترم.
حوار. That's my question here. Do you have any problem, like, I need just to get your thoughts before I tell you, like, I share mine with you. Is there any question with assigning, 50 points to only like 25 MCQs, multiple choice questions?
هو ما ينفعش يبقى اكتر من 25 multiple choice؟ اصل كده مشكلة، يعني الغلطة هتودينا.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, this is like, by the way, this is like the easiest track for me.
طب هو في option تاني ولا هيبقى ده بس الاوبشن بتاعنا؟
The thing is, I'm trying, but I haven't received any like clear-cut reply from the faculty. I was told that I can give you like one essay question to answer, and then I can assign, some grades, from the final, from the ones allocated, for the final. So the thing here is to give you a question like the take-home exam, okay? Perhaps like we can decide on the date, okay? And then you can upload your answers, on Blackboard, and this would account for. I haven't received any reply, but for me, I would say like half and half. Like I would give you like an essay or 2 essays that would account for 25, and then I will leave like the multiple choice questions, the 25 multiple choice questions for the final, and would assign 1 point, for each question.
دكتور هو احنا موافقين على الاقتراح بتاع اللي هو يكون زي questions essay كده زي الميد تيرم، واحنا نجاوب عليها ونبعتها لحضرتك تاني.
Okay, but have you got the schedule for the final?
لا.
Okay, so we don't know on what day. Okay, but in total, you are okay, you are fine with the idea, right? Having an essay.
Yes,
doctor, it's better for us. Doctor, better for us.
Sorry?
دكتور عاوزة أسأل سؤال، هيبقى الاسي questions دي هنذاكر لها بقى من اللكتشرز ولا ساعتها هنقرا برضو اللي هو الريدنجز اللي حضرتك بتبعتيها؟
Readings. All will be, and this will be like even the multiple choice ones. will be open book exam as well. But the thing is, you have to pay attention to like the tiny details.
لا بلاش يا دكتور المالتيبل تشويس ده.
ايوه يا دكتور يا ريت يعني صعب.
دكتور يا ريت يبقى take home exam عشان multiple choice هيبقى.
Yeah, this is not me. This is like the decision of
the faculty.
Yeah. This is not my decision. Yeah. Yeah, because like open book, it doesn't go with the multiple choice, by the way. But anyhow, this is how they decided on this.
دكتور بس احنا عايزين نوضح لحضرتك ان الكلاس ورك بتاعنا كلنا بجد قليل جدا، فاحنا محتاجين حضرتك تساعدينا اكتر عشان يعني نحاول ان احنا نعدي الكورس.
No. The curve is okay, by the way. You're talking about yourself.
مش عارفة، هو انا الكلاس ورك بتاعي بصراحة مش كويس خالص يعني.
ايه دكتور احنا
يا دكتور هو اغلبنا
اتكلم على الجروب ولقينا ان معظمنا جايب درجات مش مرضية ابدا، فمش عارفين هو
فعلا كلنا.
in what assignment؟
اخر واحد، ولما جمعناهم كلهم على بعض الدرجة مش احسن حاجة ان هي تكون درجة طبيعية يعني.
لا بس يا دكتور هي المشكلة من عندنا احنا يعني مش من حضرتك ابدا، احنا بس يعني المادة صعبة شوية فاحنا يعني
Yeah, I'll try. Yeah, that's the thing. It's one way to help out with this is like to offer like essay questions, and I promise it will be like much easier. But by the way, some of your colleagues actually gained full marks. So it's part of justice and fairness considerations as well. Just to reward those, you know, who studied and managed to answer the question. So I cannot offer like any kind of bonus, but what I can do is like to help out with the final by offering, you know, essay questions to help you like to collect, you know, some marks or some points. Because if I allocate like, this is my only concern, if I allocate like 50% or 50 points, you know, for multiple choice questions, this is like a heads up. You will lose, you know, some points. And this is like totally objective, no subjectivity in this.
Yes.
Yeah, it will be like a bubble sheet and the machine, you know, will mark this. So like if I have like a representative of the class, you can like deliberate this, you know, among yourselves and get back to me. Okay, I'm perfectly fine. By the way, like going, you know, for the multiple choice type for the final, this is like much easier for me. The machine, you know, will grade, so I don't need to read like 70 like papers or to grade your essay questions. Okay, so it's totally up to you, but I'm giving you the disadvantages of this. Okay.
Okay.
هو يا دكتور فعلا هو الام سي كيو هيعرضنا ان احنا نقص درجات كتير جدا يعني
Yeah, from my experience. Yeah, from my experience, you guys like here in Egypt, you don't do well with the multiple choice questions.
طيب حضرتك هو يعني هتكون ايه المشكلة لو احنا كلنا متفقين على ان هو يكون essay questions وكده take home quiz.
Yeah, the thing is this is like a decision made by the faculty.
دكتور هو أنا I think إن لو حضرتك قلتي للكلية إنه طبيعة المادة مش هتنفع قوي مع ال MCQ.
Yeah, but I haven't received like any clear reply yet. So I'm trying to look into. I'll try to look into this and get back to you. But I just needed to test the.
دكتور هو احنا عندنا بوينت في الانستراكشن بتقول ان من كل دكتور حقه ان هو يحدد شكل الامتحان بتاعه على طبيعة المقرر، فاحنا اوريدي عندنا بوينت بتقول الكلام ده، بس مش عارفة هو حضرتك وصل لك الكلام ده ولا لا، فانا كنت بقول يعني اقول لحضرتك النقطة دي.
When did you get? Can you forward this to me or just like email this to me? Okay, because I'm.
Okay, دكتور.
Until yesterday I haven't, you know, got something similar to this.
يعني ممكن ابعتها لحضرتك بعد المحاضرة؟
Yeah, but I just want to make sure you're okay with the essay questions, right?
احنا
اوكي يا دكتور كلنا اوكي.
Yes يا دكتور.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
يا دكتور كلنا تمام.
Okay. Okay, see, let me like check on this with the people at FEPS, and then I'll get back to you with like precise and concrete like answer and steps next lecture. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, guys. Yeah. See you next
Doctor.
lecture. Yeah. Salma?
Oh, yes. I was wondering if you could elaborate more on the paper, the topic of Lebanon. Last time you elaborated on the other topics, so I was wondering if you could do that with Lebanon as well.
In what sense, Salma? You have the question, yeah?
No, like last time you explained the ones about Egypt and Syria, you gave like an outline of what we should cover. If that's...
By the way, if you did these readings, Kamit's work, by the way, it offered like, this is like, but I'm not going to affect your decision. But here, basically, how, because it's the targeting, you know, or the targeting policies or the patronage on the distribution of the material benefits, basically focused on its ethnic-based, you know, distribution. So how these kind of electoral and patronage politics activating, you know, this ethnicity in Lebanon.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So this is the question, okay? And this is like, you have like the theoretical tool. There is each question, by the way, entails the answer. Because yeah, I've got like an email regarding whether or not you have to select like another theoretical approach in order to answer the Arab socialism one. It's very clear how ideologies or how ideas affect the formulation of decision, formulation of economic policies or economic decisions. Here, how like this kind of distribution or like the patronage policies in Lebanon would activate and trigger and perpetuate sectarianism and ethnicity in Lebanon.
I understand that. I understand. I just I thought in Syria you mentioned we had to see or seek other readings. So I thought maybe that's
yeah, because the thing is, if you see here, this is like perhaps like the difficult topic to work on, because I didn't give them any readings that actually applied, you know, the theoretical framework to the Syrian case. So it would be up to the students to examine how ethnicity and how Bashar al-Assad used this card. So they had to develop their own tools, their methodological tools to answer this. But here you have like very like well-established literature in this topic.
Yes, okay. So I'm just gonna...
You're still making up your mind?
Kind of, but I'm leaning more to Lebanon.
You're what? Leaning to where? Yeah, okay, yeah. Any other, but when you start, Salma, when you start reading, you will find it like much more easier than you think. Okay, if
I checked like the first two, and I thought the sequencing of the theory, I found the sequence. I mean,
yeah.
I understood what's the link.
Yeah, but you still need like some empirical evidence from like electoral records. Okay, so you still need like, you know, some supporting, you know, evidence to support your to have like your compelling argument by offering, you know, some examples from particular elections.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Doctor.
Yeah, and by the way, in all questions, guys, so in some areas you will need to do your research on your own in order to elaborate or to explain more some areas. Okay, and after, in the process of reading and writing, if you have like any question, just email me.
Okay, thank you, Doctor.
Okay, yeah. Okay, guys, see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor.
Yeah.
Thank you, Doctor.